Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, I love the smell of nonfiction in the morning, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And, you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to assume that you do, because you're listening right now. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can give us that old subscribe and 5-star rating, basically wherever you find your podcast. We're at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google. It's all good on pretty much every platform. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel, so if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Please follow us on social media, too. You can find us on the Facebook, on the Twitter, and on the Instagram, as the kids say, at In the Seats. And finally, and I do dare say this is the most important thing, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, film festivals, basically the moving image at large, because if we love to write about it and talk about it, we love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please pay us a visit. On this episode, we got a good one. It's we're launching into some nonfiction. It is Hot Docs. The Hot Docs International Canadian Film Festival has launched today. Let me pull up the dates here. Yes, it's the Canadian International Documentary Film Festival, so please excuse me on that. But it runs today from April 28th through May 8th here in the Greater Toronto area, and also online. If you have a hankering to catch some films that way, it's a great way to check it out. So first and foremost, do check them out over at hotdocs.ca for all sorts of fun info. But what we've got now is, because it's opening night, we've got an interview with the director of the film that is opening this prestigious festival. The film is called Into the Weeds, and the director is Jennifer Baichwal. And it's a David and Goliath story, really, or David versus Goliath story, really, of a former groundskeeper who takes on a multinational agrochemical corporation after his terminal cancer diagnosis. It dives into sort of how the world sort of grows its food and how we coexist with it, and just sort of the disconnect therein. And I mean, it highlights sort of the responsibilities that we should have but don't have, and it's an incredibly well done film. And like I said, it is opening tonight as a part of Hot Docs, the Canadian International Documentary Film Festival. It's playing tonight, it is playing tomorrow, and it is playing on Saturday, May 7th. Here in Toronto, so if you're interested, go check it out. And it's also opening theatrically later in May, I believe, on the 20th, so you can check it out there too. But first, check out our conversation with Jennifer, because we went into a few topics, and it's a good one. But go check out Hot Docs and check out Into the Weeds whenever you get a chance, either at the festival or later on in May when it opens theatrically.
All right. Well, I mean, first off, just thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Now, I mean, obviously, congratulations on the film. I mean, my jaw was definitely on the floor for a good portion of it, but walk me through, I guess, the origins on your end, you deciding to sort of tackle this story, and like, what was the hook in for you as a storyteller that made you want to tell the story?
Well, I'll tell you how Nick responded when I said that this is what I wanted to do. He was like, "What?" You know, we had just finished Anthropocene, and we were at Sundance, and we were talking to people there who it was all just starting, right? There was Lee's trial in 2018, and then all of these other cases, and because he was the bellwether, as they call it, the one that everyone waits to see how that one does, right? Before the mass torts happen and the thousands get represented. So I immediately just assumed that somebody was recording it. And, you know, I've been an environmentalist for many years, and that's a company that the name has popped up, let's say, over the years, numerous times, not in a good way. And I when I asked about whether anybody was doing it and found out that nobody was, we then went to meet with the group of lawyers who formed the sort of executive of that multi-district litigation and said, look, somebody should be recording this. There needs to be a kind of historical record of this admittedly cliche, but David versus Goliath fight. And we just launched into it, and it was really complicated, like legally. I mean, every single claim that is made in the film is backed up with evidence, was made in court. There's no fast, loose talk, right? Like
No,
it's
yeah.
incredibly, and we had to do all of that, both ethically and also to not, be sued or go to jail. So we're just kind of, but I have to say, to me, the combination of the heroism of this ordinary guy and the bigger picture of systemic pesticide use and the more, ecosystem level effects that is happening. I just felt like, oh my God, I have to try to tell this story.
I mean, it's always something I'm fascinated by too, just especially when you're making a film and documenting something that's more or less happening in real time. I'm kind of curious, do you focus on him? Do you focus on the subject? How do you what's your base point? Because I mean, I got to imagine as you're assembling things and things are going on, it's not just one moving target, it's several moving targets to know which way the movie's going to go.
Well, plus it was COVID. So we started in 2019. And then, went into 2020. And I remember we were on our way to visit Lee. And I was in the San Francisco, one of those airport hotels, waiting for Nick, who was coming from Seattle, where he'd been filming actually with Brian Johnson. They were doing the Ink film together. And in fact, Nick got terrible poison oak from that shoot, so whatever. So we were about to go to Lee, and I was sitting in the hotel restaurant, this huge room, and saw that the NBA was getting shut down.
Yeah.
And I just realized we can't go visit somebody when you've been traveling and I've been traveling who is immunocompromised. And there's just no way. We have to go home. And we called Lee, and he was like, oh, don't be silly, come. I'm like, we're not coming, right? And that was the beginning of the end, in the sense that we had to do a lot of it remotely. We had to do our Germany shoot remotely. We had to do our Swiss shoot remotely. And then finally, thank God we already had footage at that point. And then we just started delving into the trial footage, which was incredibly complex, dense, and how do you kind of tell this story so that it keeps moving and also that people understand everything that was brought up. There's a lot of science in there. And I know it runs to the didactic compared to some of our other films, but there was just no way to do it without giving all of that information so people really understood what was at stake.
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, because I mean, it is, I've got, I mean, just on a personal standpoint, I've got to imagine doing research over Zoom is a horrible thing, or, trying to edit or anything like that. But I'm kind of curious, when it comes down to sort of nailing down the science, and I mean, like you said, you had to sort of lay it out in a way just to be clear with it. But I mean, how do you sort of rustle that into the story, I guess would be my question. Because I mean, obviously you don't want to be sort of hammering us with facts, but you have to hammer us with facts a little bit. How do you balance the need of story versus the sort of the nuts and bolts of it all?
Well, so that's the tricky thing. And have we done it? I don't know. I really,
I think you have,
I mean, we just QC'd the DCP for the festival. And I was kind of, Nick said, yeah, it's a bit explainy. And I was like, but what could we have taken out? First of all, the science stuff was really dense, and trying to understand those studies, and then the Monsanto papers, trying to, really illustrate what those were. So it's the first time that we've actually worked with a really kick-ass graphic designer, and Justin Stevenson did all of our animation and graphics. was a huge help in actually conveying the information. But first you had to understand it yourself. So every single, like it was like doing a degree in epidemiology, right? Like so that was hard, and honing all of that, and I was working with the two editors that I've worked with since the beginning, David Warnsby and Roland Schlem, and they were like, tag teaming, but David sort of started and then Roland came in, and Roland was really good at like helping me parse the science and also the trial. But when you're with somebody like Lee or any of those other plaintiffs, and you are understanding their suffering and pain, and they're ordinary people who were using something that they're told was safe, you just, that in itself is a balancer in terms of the facts, etc. But then you have to understand, like, I don't think most people know, and I certainly didn't know, how much glyphosate is used around the world, everywhere. Like, we're just not talking about farmers' fields or people's dandelions in their gardens. We are talking about vast swaths of land, everywhere, highways, rail lines, hydro lines, parks, cemeteries, golf courses, school grounds, baseball diamonds. Like, it's everywhere. And forests. Like, if we hadn't have gone to visit Real and actually gone to those places where literally the eerie silence of the pine plantation, where it's like, where are the birds? Where's the insects? Where's the animals? Nobody's here because it's all been sprayed. So that had to be conveyed as well. And I think, I hope that the personal story of Lee, this kind of everyman hero who is, he's a quiet guy who doesn't draw a lot of attention to himself or try to, and he knew he had to do it. And that to me was the bravery of that is pretty extraordinary. But pitting that, or not pitting it, but more melding it with the bigger picture of ecosystem level repercussions was the goal.
No, and I mean, I think you've done that really well, because I mean, particularly with Lee, just because I mean, he is such a compelling subject and such a sort of fascinating person to see. And I mean, nobody in the film feels like a victim, even though in reality, given the horrible effects of this chemical, in many ways, we're all kind of victims, if that makes any kind of sense. I mean, I think it was important, and I think you did this really well, just to not to make it feel blamey, as it were. It just felt like this is how it is, and this is why we have to fix it. I'm glad. Like, was it important for you to sort of push the issue versus pointing a finger, if that makes any kind of sense?
Oh, completely. And believe me, there's been a lot of material on Monsanto and its history as a company, and the GMO, and all of that, and all the suicides of farmers in India after they can't afford the seeds anymore, and those kind of things. And first legally, as I said, like it was on the line for us. Like, we had to back every single claim up. And so what we really just did was follow the evidence that was given in court and the arguments that were given in court, and then find a way of making that argument so that we were not making claims of our own, or, Michael Moorish type, massive claims. That's another type of film. That's another approach. Didn't want to do that because I also didn't want to lose credibility. The science is really strong. And when the International Association for Research on Cancer comes out with a classification that says it is probably carcinogenic to humans, and the company has $17 million set aside in their budget that year to fight that ruling, to discredit the scientists that were part of it, to malign IR, try to stop funding for them. Like, wow, you can't make that stuff up.
No, you can't. It's disgusting, and it's shocking in so many different ways. But there's something else about this film, and I mean, I think this is a line that you, and particularly Nick, and just your partnership together, have had throughout your films, is that they're, in many ways, they're always very beautiful films. And I mean, there's a lot of great photography and a lot of great footage. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, how do you feel your style of filmmaking helps elevate the issue? Because I mean, obviously you could tell this story in a much more didactic way with facts and trial and this and subjects and the whole other way, but we get a lot of, I guess, boots on the ground, as it were, or sort of drones in the air, depending on how you look at it, just to see the feels and to see the effects and to see sort of what is actually happening. How important is it for you to sort of show it as opposed to just sort of report it?
Well, I don't ever think that, like, I wouldn't say that I'm a journalist.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a real art to journalism, and oh my God, like with what's happening right now in Ukraine, without that reporting, we wouldn't have any idea of what's happening. And it's crucial that we have that kind of attempted unbiased reporting. And I don't think it's easy to I'm not suggesting that objectivity is even really possible. I don't know how unbiased we can be. I think journalism at its best comes the closest to that. This is not that, but I'm glad you say that, because I am someone who firmly believes that I don't really have a style. Like that the style, the form proceeds from the content and what the content sort of needs in terms of treatment. And this film needed more like facts, graphics, graphs, information. But at the same time, I'm always compelled to step back and feel the big picture. And part of that was a question of how do you show that? And, well, you show it from above, you show it from those fields, you think about ubiquity of use when you're actually looking at these landscapes that have been saturated, and then learning, oh, this glyphosate is sprayed on highways, it's sprayed in parks, etc. It's sprayed in golf courses, it's sprayed in cemeteries, it's sprayed in my kid's school ground, that kind of thing. But then going even further into that and learning that it started to be used as a desiccant for drying out crops before harvest. And that was when it was really sprayed on food for the first time. So the fact that there's all of this residue in our food because it is an effective mechanism for drying a crop out evenly before harvest. But so that was also a real shock. How do you show that? How do you pull back from that? So we always try. Film is a visual medium, so you can't just write a book. It's not that. Would this have been better as a book? I always say that to my students, to myself. Why is this a film? Like, why are you making this a film? And I think the combination of the absolute heart-wrenching stories of Lee and the other plaintiffs, combined with this bigger picture thing that we can all think about, it's film. It can be, it can work in this medium, and we really tried to make it work. So I'm glad that you found that.
Now, I mean, I'm always curious because, I mean, obviously you can draw parallels with this and something like Anthropocene, but you can't necessarily do it with A Long Time Running or other films like that. And I'm kind of curious for you, when you're looking at a story, is it the issue? Is it the subject? Like, what is the thing that draws you in?
Oh, it's, I used to think that all films started with a problem I couldn't figure out, or something, and then it just was sort of like nag at me, and then I just had to dive in a way. And that in the early films, our Paul Bowles film was kind of an exploration of the impossibility of biography, and The Holier It Gets was about the perils of confessional work. Why do you just assume that because something means something to you, it's going to mean something to other people too, right? And how do you keep that balance? And how do you not go so far over that you're pandering to the viewer, but also and betraying the subject? Or, are you so into the minutia of the subject that the viewer's like, I don't care about this. So that was a problem. The true meaning of pictures was the problem of representation and documentary. How do we all do it, how do you do it ethically? Is it even possible to do it ethically? You know, and then it becomes more about also relationships. Like long time running, we didn't do press for that film because I just thought everybody was going to ask us about when Gord was going to die, and it was just, and it was just this thing of like, this is his story. It's not our story. And it's the band's story. And it became about like, it was about love. Like it was about the love for this person that the whole country had. And so I guess, sorry, I'm sort of going off, but I think every single subject has its own universe. Every film is its own universe, and it has its own rules, and it has the way that it sort of wants to be told. And the reason that I always put at the end of our films, this film was shot and edited without a traditional script, is to really draw attention to the fact that these are explorations. These are not things that we go out and execute, that we have an idea. It's about living with people and contexts and situations, unfolding situations, and reacting to them in a way that is both artful in terms of our, you know, our medium, but also ethical in terms of the way that we engage. And I would say that that's the constant. It's the, how do we make this meaningful in film, and how do we do it in a way that is ethical and kind in terms of the engagement that we have.
No, and you know what? I mean, I think with this film, you've really done that and then some, because I think it's the perfect encapsulation of, on one end, giving us this view of this really unique and extraordinary human being who stood up and did the right thing in the face of, you know, the impossible, which is, you know, a lot easier said than done most days, but still highlighting a very important and really shocking issue at the same time. And I think you've made a fantastic film. And I just want to say thank you for the time today.
Thank you so much. That really lifts, that's put some wind in my sails. Thank you. Next time, hopefully it'll be in person.
Oh, for sure. I'm sure I'll run into you somewhere. No, absolutely. Talk to you soon, Jennifer. All right. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.